12 o'clock on your Thursday afternoon. Welcome in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you once again, getting you closer to the end of the week. Our guy, Cale Wilson, producing on the other side of the glass. Jack, I've started off the show tangling my headphones. I don't even know how I did this, but we're off to a rousing start.
Yeah, man. It's good to be back on here with you for another day here, filling in. And, hopefully those headphones, hopefully they get a little bit unwired as you untangled, I should say, as you move along.
Well, for anybody that's watching the Game TV, sponsored by Shepherd Glass and powered by our friends at Integrated Media, I have my laptop charger sitting in my lap. I've got my headphones plugged in as I was unplugging the headphones that Wes was wearing, and somehow I've got these crossed. I'm going to have to wait until the break because I'd have to unplug and plug back in. So I'll deal with it, but that's how the show's starting today.
Yeah, sounds like a good way to start off the show today.
We'll try and get things back on track as we roll our way through here. One thing I want to focus on today, again, 17 days away from kickoff between Carolina and Virginia Tech. So last week we went through, when we were out at Minuteman Press on, I believe that was last Thursday, we went through every opponent and discussed what concerned us, but also what made us feel good about that matchup with South Carolina, and, kind of pros and cons thing for every team. And yesterday, we were talking about Pete Nakos's list, right, of the top 10 most valuable non-quarterbacks in college football. And Dylan Stewart was second on that list, say rightfully so, behind only Jeremiah Smith. And I made the argument that I thought Dylan Stewart was maybe the most valuable given what he means to his team individually in terms of their success. Because, listen, you could take Jeremiah Smith off the Buckeyes and they could still go win the national championship. But our opinion of South Carolina's defense significantly changes if you remove Dylan Stewart from it.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's the same way with the offense. If Lenore Sellers isn't out there, things are completely different in terms of how you look at these teams if your star players aren't on either side of the ball. And look, Dylan Stewart is one piece of the puzzle on the defense, but he's arguably the biggest piece you have. So having him out there, being as effective as he's proven to be last year and going into this year, you need that definitely.
So I wanted to take the opportunity today over the course of the next couple of hours and individually look at South Carolina's 10 Power 4 opponents. And again, I mean no disrespect to South Carolina State. I mean no disrespect to Coastal Carolina. But I just wanted to focus on the 10 Power 4 teams that Carolina will play, starting with Virginia Tech in 17 days and ending with Clemson at the end of the regular season, to see what non-quarterbacks give us the most concern for each team. And, we're not including quarterbacks in this list, obviously, but, man, you want to talk about some tough quarterbacks you're going to have to play this year with Nussmeier, with Klubnik, with Diego Pavia, with John Mateer, who I expect to be really, really good. Like, Carolina's dealing with a lot of high-caliber quarterbacks this upcoming year, which, again, goes back to your defense needing to be really good if you want to see success this season.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are so many talented quarterbacks in this league, but, again, there's so many question marks, too, of, what are these guys going to do? Like, not every team in the league has their Lenore Sellers right now, even at Florida, DJ Lagway, banged up, is he going to be ready to go for week one? How about Garrett Nussmeier? He's banged up, too. So, honestly, is it far-fetched to say that South Carolina is in the best position right now as far as the quarterback goes?
Pretty darn good. And, again, knock on wood that we get through these next, week and a half, 2 weeks to remain healthy. But, yeah, I mean, you love everything you've heard. And again, we expect an even bigger step forward for Sellers in year number 2 after having another offseason development and all that kind of stuff, that I feel pretty confident about what he's going to be able to do and the success this team's going to have.
No, most definitely. Now, I know we're talking about non-quarterback threats.
Yep.
You want to start here with Virginia Tech?
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to go defensive here. And this is somebody that Phil Still brought up last week when we talked to him on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. I'm going to go with Ben Bell, who is on the defensive line for the Hokies, transferred over from Texas State. In 2023, he had 10 sacks on the season. Last year, through the first 4 games, he had 3.5, and he became one of those guys that self-shirted, as we like to call it, where he knew his caliber of play was so high that he was going to be a sought-after commodity in the portal. So went ahead and redshirted himself, and now is at Virginia Tech. And look, they lost a lot on defense. Got a new defensive coordinator that came in, for this season. This guy has the potential to be a real problem for Carolina in week number 1.
Oh, definitely. Now, I'll go on the other side of the ball here with the offense. And, it's easy to say Kyron Jones, but this is a non-quarterback threat. I really do think at the running back position, Terrion Stewart could be a good guy to pay attention to for Virginia Tech in this game, especially if he's able to make the smooth transition over from Bowling Green here to Virginia Tech. So he's a senior running back, 5'9", 222. He's replacing Bashal Tutin, who was the leading rusher for the Hokies last year with over 1,100 yards and 15 touchdowns. A lot of production to replace. But you look at some of the things that Terrion Stewart did last year at Bowling Green. 166 carries, 898 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaged 5.5 yards per carry. So he had some really nice games last year out there at Bowling Green. Now, if he's able to replicate that in any way here with the Hokies, that's massive because that takes a little bit of the pressure off of Jones' shoulders heading into the season.
And these are two guys in terms of a pass rusher and somebody that's going to be running the football for the Hokies that potentially attack two weak areas of this team. Again, when you look at last year, the offensive line for Carolina struggled, particularly when you talked about the tackle spots. Now, yes, Josiah Thompson got better as the season went along. Casey Henry had a lot of bumps along the road as he went through his first full healthy season as a starter last year. And then running the ball was something that Carolina was really good at stopping a year ago when you had your big guys in the middle there with TJ Sanders and Tonka and Boogie and guys like that. Well, you lost all those guys, and we don't know how good that run stopping's going to be this upcoming year, not to mention you lost all your speed at linebacker from a year ago. So a guy like that is somebody that could potentially give South Carolina a lot of problems in that first game.
No, most definitely. Now, you want to let's shift over to the Vanderbilt game here.
Yep.
I'll start out here. You look at Diego Pavia, really good quarterback, obviously. Now, the obvious name that followed him from New Mexico State here to Vanderbilt, his favorite target, and this is a big one, Eli Stowers, tight end for Vandy. And, that's a guy that is going to be a name to keep an eye on for sure going into this game. 49 catches last year, 638 yards, 5 touchdowns. Again, like I said, that's Diego's favorite target, and so that's someone to, he will definitely be getting the ball plenty in that game.
Yeah, well, we're thinking alike here because that's exactly who I put down. And look, Vanderbilt does have talented players, but outside of Diego Pavia, if I have to pick a non-quarterback, Eli Stowers is impossible to ignore. And again, he comes over with that same offensive system following from New Mexico State where Pavia was at the year prior, and those two guys just never really missed a beat. And it's kind of one of those things when you watch Pavia play, it's funny enough, they're just showing some Johnny Manziel highlights on the Pat McAfee show a couple seconds ago. Johnny Manziel would scramble until Mike Evans got open, right? And he'd always find him somewhere down the field, if not for a first down and a big gain for a touchdown. And you almost kind of see the same thing with Diego Pavia. And when you have such a good rapport with a guy like Stowers, you can do that because you guys almost kind of think alike to where Pavia is, trying to keep the play alive, and boom, Stowers comes open, finds him downfield for a first down or touchdown or whatever it may be. That is a hard type of duo to slow down that Carolina did a pretty good job of holding them in check last year. He had 4 receptions for 41 yards, and again, Pavia didn't have his best day that day against Carolina out in Nashville, and you certainly hope that's going to be the case again this year.
You need it to be. No, you really do need it to be. Moving ahead to Missouri, I'll go to the defensive side of the ball now. I look at Josiah Trotter as someone to really, that could be a potential threat when you look at what he brings. Now, he played at West Virginia. He was the Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year last year, and he transferred over to Missouri here to join a defense that I think could be, relatively good this year. You look at how he did last year, 93 total tackles, 37 solo. He had half a sack, so not a lot in that regard. He also had a really big interception against Oklahoma State last year to help secure a big win for the Mountaineers there. But looking at him, I think he's someone that definitely got to pay attention to.
So I'm going to go to the transfer portal for this one, and Marquise Humphrey Grace, who is an interior defensive lineman that transferred over from South Dakota. in the past couple of years at South Dakota, and that's one of the better programs in all of FCS football. I did not make these stats up. 15 sacks over his 2 seasons there as an interior defensive lineman, 6'4", 270 pounds. This guy could become a problem. Now, you obviously always have to say, all right, well, that guy's playing at the FCS level. How's that going to translate to the SEC? But again, from what I see on paper up to this point, he's somebody that you're going to have to account for, especially if your offensive line that early in the season is not gelling the way that we need it to. And unfortunately, that's been the case the past couple of years. That's a guy that could cause real issues for you.
Totally. Again, we talk about that Missouri game early in the year being one that's like, hey, if South Carolina can go 5-0, that means you go to Missouri and win probably the toughest game you have in that first month of what's considered to be an easier part of the schedule, no doubt, which it totally is when you have Vanderbilt, Kentucky, teams that I think you should probably beat, although Vanderbilt, you never know. And then obviously Virginia Tech and SC State. But you look at that Missouri game, and again, it's still going to be early enough in the year to where you're 5 games or 4 games in, but it's like if you're not gelling properly on that offensive line, guys like this can definitely exploit that. So, yeah, I mean, look, this Missouri defense, I mean, they really, I think, brought in some nice guys, and these 2 in particular definitely could help a lot.
Correction here. I was looking ahead to my Kentucky player. I'll have to get that again on the other side. For Missouri, I had it listed. I miscalculated my own writing here. It was actually Ahmad Hardy that I had for Missouri, who had 1,300 yards at ULM. Missouri always runs the ball really well against South Carolina for whatever reason, and they ran really well last year with Nate Noel when they came to Columbia. So he's somebody, and again, you have that question of transitioning up from a G5 school up to a Power 4 institution. But this guy last year, Nate Noel, came up from he's either at App State or Georgia Southern. I can't remember which one, but he came in and obviously ran well over against the Gamecocks, and that was a really good run defense last year for South Carolina. And no reason to think Ahmad Hardy can't do the same thing for Missouri.
Oh yeah, I mean that's that. There we go. That's the right player to have in there. So, no, definitely. I think his production definitely is going to be valuable for the Tigers this year.
So that's something we're going to be doing throughout the course of the show today, is looking at all of South Carolina's Power 4 opponents and kind of detailing which non-quarterback we find potentially be the biggest threat. And look, there are some teams, and we'll get into it, especially as we get later on in this list, where you have the ranked opponents where, gosh, I couldn't decide between like 2 to 3 guys on some of these teams because of how loaded they are. But you kind of got a little bit of an easier start, not easy start of the season, but an easier start of the season with some of these opponents that are non-ranked. But they certainly have guys that are capable of causing you problems if you do not account for them very carefully. So we'll hit Kentucky and LSU coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you, Kale Wilson, producing on the other side of the glass on your Thursday here on the game. We'll get back into non-quarterback threats coming up here in just a moment, but I do want to remind you, the Game Summer Golf Classic, sponsored by Krager Showrooms, formerly The Nest in the Vista, is coming up a week from tomorrow at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Tee time is at 9. Registration will begin at 7:30. Going to have the onion sausages for breakfast as always. Mimosa bar provided by Saki's Wine and Spirits and Firehouse Subs for lunch, which, of course, are always, always delicious. Shout out to our guy, Larry Chandler. Going to have prizes, and the golf gun makes its return as well. If you want to take part, give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000. It's only $400 per team to sign up. Again, call Charwood at 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to sign up for the Game Summer Golf Classic, sponsored by Krager Showrooms. Again, we ran through the first 3 Power 4 opponents for South Carolina there in terms of non-quarterback threats with Virginia Tech, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. Again, the Missouri game is one that you look at and say, okay, that could certainly be tricky going on the road to Como, but we feel confident that Carolina has an opportunity to hopefully start the season 4-1, if not maybe even 5-0, and that 5th game would be coming against Kentucky. And I did kind of spoil my thing a moment ago by saying this guy was on Missouri before correcting myself, but I'll once again reiterate, Marquise Humphrey-Grace, who spent the past 2 years at South Dakota State, interior defensive lineman, 6'4", 270 pounds, 15 sacks over the course of 2 seasons. Kentucky no longer has Deone Walker, the big ugly in the middle of that defense anymore, so I feel as though Marquise Humphrey-Grace has the opportunity to come in and really make an impact.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would absolutely agree with you. And I'm going to stick on the defensive side of the ball here for this one, too. Linebacker Alex Afari Jr. He's in his senior year now with the team, and he had 35 tackles last year with 1.5 sacks. But he's someone that, over his career has had 132 tackles, 19.5 TFLs. And he's someone that, look, Kentucky lost a lot on their defense in terms of guys like Deone Walker that went to the NFL draft and were picked. So a guy like this, having Afari back as a senior, as one of the leaders on the defense, is definitely going to be big going into this year.
Yeah, and that's one, look, Kentucky is a program that's in rough shape right now, right? Like, we talk about Mark Stoops being on the hot seat and all that kind of stuff, and again, I don't know if his buyout is going to allow him to get fired if they have another bad year this upcoming year. But, they're a team that showed you last year. Look at that game against Georgia, right? Carolina came in and blew the doors off of Kentucky. Kentucky, a couple weeks later would beat Ole Miss, and then they're a team that played a one-point game against Georgia. You just never really know what you're going to get. And I've said this before. When Mark Stoops has a really bad season and it feels like his back's up against the wall and he's definitely on the way out, they proceed to go out there and have a better season like the next year, and that quells some of the conversation around him and things cool off a bit. So you got to be careful. I know we kind of circle that game as a definite win for Carolina, but you can never be too sure when it comes to a team like Kentucky.
100%. I mean, look, the early part of the schedule, as we've mentioned, it's significantly easier compared to the back half, right? Like from October on, when you play LSU, it's going to be really tough. And then it gets tougher from there with Oklahoma, Bama, teams like that. And then you round it out with Clemson. In the beginning of the year, as much as we talk about South Carolina having the chance to really do some great things this year, getting off to a bad start would basically tank any real possibility of, number one, making the playoff. I mean, the whole complexion of the season is viewed entirely differently if South Carolina doesn't get off to a good start in those first 5 games. And again, Kentucky is that last game of that 5-game stretch before the bye week. And it's at home. You were a 10-point dog going into this game last year when you played them, and you walloped them. And Kentucky's really looked like they got a completely different team this year. Zach Calzada is at quarterback. No more Barian Brown. You brought in Kendrick Law to potentially replace a guy like Barian Brown. That's another name to probably keep an eye on heading into this season in terms of players to watch that aren't the quarterbacks. But Kentucky, I mean, we don't expect much from them this year, but you just never know what can happen in this league.
If you get through those first 5 games and you have 2 losses, you go 3-2 in those first 5 games, I think your chances of making the playoffs are gone at that point because
Oh, sorry.
I struggle to think if you're going 3-2 in those games that you're going to survive the gauntlet of those final 6 out of those 7 games being against ranked teams, all SEC with the exception of Clemson there. I have a tough time thinking you're going to be in any kind of position to go on a crazy run there. So starting the season off well is vitally important. I brought the stat up yesterday during the 10 o'clock hour. Do you know what Carolina's record in the first month of the season is under Shane Beamer? So like August/September?
No, I don't.
10-8. So it's a winning record. You don't know how many Power 4 wins they have in that period of time?
How many?
2. Mississippi State 2 years ago and Kentucky last year. That is the only Power 4 teams that Carolina's beaten in the first month of the season. And now you look at it and say, well, congratulations, you have 4 of them this time.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, man. It really is. Like, it's going to be something where you look at it and it's like South Carolina should, like, again, so much of the season is hinged on the fact that, like, we are so presumptuous in the fact of we think South Carolina's going 4-1 out of the gate. We think they're going 5-0 out of the gate. But what happens if they don't? What happens if, like you said, Tyler, what happens if they go 3-2 out of the gate where they lose to Missouri and then they drop one of Kentucky or Vanderbilt? That's 2 SEC losses. Number one, you're not getting to the SEC championship with a record like that, with 2 losses right out of the gate. But then you look at what comes up after that. I mean, we're talking about regression. We are. So, yeah, there is a possibility where South Carolina could very well go 5-0, and that would make the season a real much more clear to get towards that 10-win mark and potentially go to the college football playoff and all that. But if you start out slow, and even if you lose this Virginia Tech game, we talk about these games all kind of being like layups for South Carolina in a lot of ways. But seriously, they have not gotten off to good starts in games in the first game of the year. You know, Old Dominion last year, we figured that was a cakewalk, and then they needed a little fourth quarter touchdown and a stop at the end of the game to win. And then you look at 2 years ago, UNC, they played awful that game. So South Carolina in season openers has not particularly been great recently, and in the first month of the year hasn't always been pretty either. The one thing you can count on is the fact that Carolina has finished well, but it may not matter if this team gets off to a slow start.
So when we look at that first game after the bye against LSU, the 5th game against a Power 4 team, 6th game of the year, what player to you stands out as the biggest non-quarterback threat?
In terms of I'm sorry, what was that? What game was it?
So the LSU game.
The LSU, yeah, so that's what I thought I heard. I had to double check on that. I think a Barian Brown, someone that I mentioned earlier, I'm intrigued to see what he brings to this LSU team. You know, he's a guy that is obviously a all-SEC returner and a really big threat in terms of special teams. But he joins a loaded receiver room where it's like he may not need to be the guy, but you brought him in as one of the more prized players out of the portal. And I think he's someone that really could make a big impact this year.
I'm going to have to go with Harold Perkins Jr. I know the past couple of years we've talked about the inability for LSU to use him correctly because, again, he had that monster year playing on the outside on defense for the Tigers, 7.5 sacks. Last year they moved him, or then they moved him to the inside 2 years ago. Last year he gets hurt as well, dealing with an injury. And now they say they're going to play him at that star spot on the outside. So he potentially has the ability to wreak havoc once again, like he did a couple seasons ago. And if that's the case, especially with questions on the offensive line, he's somebody you're going to have to deal with.
And sticking at that linebacker position, I'll mention one more guy real quick. Whit Weeks is someone that obviously was a lot more featured in the Netflix documentary, but 61 tackles last year, 3.5 sacks, coming back for another year with the Tigers. You mentioned Harold Perkins. I think him and Whit Weeks at the linebacker position are going to be really tough to stop this season.
Yeah, that's one of the toughest linebacking cores in the entire country. Speed, physicality, size, all those kind of things that, again, you know, you had to deal with last year and you did fine. And, again, now you're going into their territory this time and trying to come out of there with a win, which will not be easy. And, again, the threat of Harold Perkins Jr. being at a spot that benefits him the best is something that, you know, could cause problems.
Yeah, going to need to stay healthy as well. So it's, you know, it could be a really good year for that LSU team.
We will continue on with this as the show goes along. But coming up next, Arch Manning has been a hot button of conversation this offseason. Is he exactly what old school fans want in a player, though? We'll discuss that coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Cale Wilson on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri, Cale Wilson, along with you here on your Thursday on the Game. Reminder, starting on Monday, the Game expands into Charleston. You'll be able to listen to us on WIWF 96.9 HD3. So we'll pretty much be statewide at that point here in Columbia, as well as in Florence, Myrtle Beach, and now Charleston, as you can look forward to listening to us out there. And as always, you can take us with you wherever you go on the 107.5 The Game. Quite literally this morning, Jack, I was riding the elevator in the building, and one of the guys in the building that listens to us said, "Hey, I listen to you guys on your app all the time." I'm like, "Thank you, sir. That's exactly what we want. You can take us with you wherever you go. It's great."
On the app, too. That is big time right there. Not on the radio, just on the app. That's huge.
Not everybody has, your typical old school radio outside of their car these days. So, hey, if you're at home or on a, bike ride or walk or something like that, boom, app, there you go.
Yeah, you can also go on to 1075thegame.com, and that's always a good way to listen to.
As well as on the Game TV, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. Boom, we simply make it impossible not to listen. That's what I always tell people.
Every option you could want.
That's right. So are you sick of hearing about Arch Manning yet? Has the conversation around him beat you over the head enough this offseason?
A little. I think I'm ready to see just how this all looks. We hear so much about him. We hear all the hype. We see he's like the Heisman favorite and stuff. I want to see it actually out there now and see what he can really do.
We're going to find out in 16 days, but listening yesterday to Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman on On3, Ari brought up a really interesting point that I hadn't really thought about, but I think he's right on this, on how Arch Manning is really the quarterback that all the old school fans, or the type of player at least that all the old school fans wishes everybody was still like. Here's what Ari said.
Almost, if not a full circle, but a circle.
Yeah.
And Arch Manning actually represents what people loved about college football. The hyped recruit who didn't draw attention to himself, put the team and the situation before him, went to a place knowing he wasn't going to play for 2 years, sat behind somebody else despite the fact that there was some argument or at least a case to be made that will be certainly talked about on this podcast in November about whether he should have played last year, kept his mouth shut, has never said anything remotely controversial, has stayed committed to learning the playbook, developing his body, being a, immaculate teammate, and sticking through what wouldn't be an easy situation, waiting his turn, and staying loyal to the program. Isn't that what everybody wants? Don't you want this person who has done it the old-fashioned way, or the old school way, or the way that you used to remember it in 2015 and before? Like, why would you root against that person? Like that's the person that's supposed to show everybody that doing it the old fashioned way is still a good way.
And again, I think he's right on a lot of that. And so much of the conversation, look, we're guilty of it as well, but we talk about it because it's a big story in college football and we kind of go where the trends go. A lot of the conversation around Manning is quite literally because of what his family is, like what his last name is. If his name was Arch Smith, he'd still be getting talked about because he'd be the starting quarterback at Texas as a former 5-star recruit, but it would pale in comparison to what's happening now because he's being presented as the next in a legacy of quarterbacks in the world of football. They call the Mannings the first family of football for a reason, and he's supposed to follow in the footsteps of his grandfather, of his uncle, and all these great players on his and his dad as well, who never got the chance, unfortunately, due to some medical stuff. But he's supposed to fall in line with those guys, which is why it's such a captivating story that, unfortunately, we do all feel like we've been beaten over the head with before the season even gets here.
And even Arch himself is so aware of the expectations that people have from him. And at SEC Media Days a few weeks ago, he himself was just talking about the fact of he's only played 2 or 3 games, started a few games. It's great and all, but he hasn't earned it yet. So he's got to go out there and earn that respect and the belief that everyone puts into him that he can be this really good quarterback. He's got to go out there and prove it. So, when you hear stuff like that, it makes it a lot easier to root for him because, again, he's not a bad guy at all from the looks of it. He seems like a pretty average, normal guy that comes from a good family and stuff. Obviously has all the hype around him. He's a good player too. So, all the right reasons to root for him. It's just we get beaten over the head talking about Arch Manning this, Arch Manning that, Arch Manning this. He doesn't control any of that. It's just, the media really loves talking about Arch Manning before he even steps foot on the field.
And they also brought up another really interesting point because, again, he's looked at as a Heisman favorite and all those kind of things. If he even has just an average year, does that guarantee him a trip to New York? Because let's face it, a lot of the Heisman Trophy has become a popularity contest. Now, again, you still have to have results on the field to back it up, but name recognition and perception goes a long way when we talk about guys that not just win the Heisman Trophy, but make it all the way to New York. And I'm not saying just on his name alone that he's going to win the darn thing, but if as long as he has a good year, it doesn't have to be elite level, I think he's probably still at least a finalist, right?
What do we consider? That's the gray area of this. What do we consider a good year? Like, are we talking like 3,000 passing yards, 25 touchdowns? Like what? I don't even think that would be enough to get to New York. I mean, that sounds like a good year, but I mean, what are we actually consider? Because normally to be in contention for the Heisman Trophy, I feel like you got to have probably like 35 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Closer to 4,000 passing yards. I mean, at that point, that might win you the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, no, and I'm trying to pull this up here because I want to see what Ewers' stats would have been through the first 12 games. And he was not obviously a Heisman finalist, but if we're just going to compare Texas quarterbacks here. So let's see. He threw 5 touchdowns, he threw an additional 6 touchdowns in the postseason. No, he threw 7 more touchdowns in the postseason. So he ended last year, his regular season, with 24 touchdowns, and I can't do that math very quickly in my head, but less than 3,000 yards passing. So let's just say, just to make a comparison here, let's just say Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning throws for 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, and just to be in line here with Quinn Ewers, throws for 5 interceptions. So 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Is that enough to get him to New York after 12 games?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think not. Like, you want to base it on his name and stuff and getting him there? Sure, go ahead. But there's only typically 5 spots, and this is mostly a quarterback award at this point. Yes, there's been Travis Hunter and Devontae Smith to win it in recent years, and even some running backs over the years. But you look at it, there are a lot of good quarterbacks. You could easily say Lenore Sellers, DJ Lagway. Heck, a lot of quarterbacks from the SEC could potentially make it. Yeah. Garrett Nussmeier is another guy. I mean, those types of guys I could see being in front of Arch if he had that hypothetical season you look at.
Now, there are a lot of lazy voters out there with the Heisman Trophy that will just kind of look at name, and I feel like that could weigh pretty heavily here.
Which I hope not. I mean, you have a vote for the Heisman Trophy. I hope you're doing your due diligence and actually picking the right players to be there and voting for who's the best player, not just the popularity contest here. So.
Yeah, but again, that's unfortunately how things go down.
Yeah. They should give us a vote. Let the real hard workers here that will pay attention.
I love
actually get the votes.
I would. I'd be pro. I'd go outside the box. It's become a quarterback award, but I like to see non-quarterbacks be in the mix too.
Yeah. Now, if you were a voter for the trophy last year, who would you vote for?
I mean, it would have been hard to deny Travis Hunter. Let's be honest here. What he was doing was so unique and so special. I didn't have a problem with him winning the thing.
Yeah, I would have voted for Genty, but the season that Travis Hunter had was, again, if he weren't a two-way player, I think, and again, that goes back to the whole popularity thing. He's a big name. If he wasn't a two-way player, I think this would be viewed a lot differently, and he wouldn't even be in New York probably. But the fact that he was, and it's just so unique, probably helped him a lot. And we'll see how much Arch's name can help him get there if he has a good season. But again, I think he's going to do just fine and get there based on the merits of having a really strong year and earning it with his play on the field.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks, Tennessee maybe he's finally decided on who's going to start for them this upcoming season. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri, Cale Wilson, along with you on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. It's our Ed and Jack Feltry along with you, Kale Wilson, producing on the other side of the glass on your Thursday here on the game. A reminder, with Irma's Little League team rolling in the World Series up in Williamsport today at 3 o'clock. You can go and cheer them on in Irma with Elijah Campbell for the watch party at Carolina Wings at 1000 Marina Road out there in Irma. Go hang out with him and, again, watch the Irma Little League team as they pursue the Little League World Series Championship rolling off today at 3 o'clock up there in Williamsport. News coming out of Knoxville, Tennessee. It would appear Joey Aguilar is on the way to becoming the Week 1 starter in what has been a chaotic, I don't know if that's the best word to describe it, but it at least paints the picture of what the offseason just at the quarterback spot's been like for Tennessee coming off of their first ever playoff appearance last year.
Yeah, so like you said, and a lot of this stems from Pete Nakos of On3, who put out a story yesterday saying at this point, it seems to be Aguilar that is trending towards earning the starting nod for Tennessee when the Vols, of course, are in Atlanta. Not on that Sunday when South Carolina is there, but the day before they'll be playing against Syracuse in Atlanta on that Saturday, 16 days from now. And look, I think we all kind of thought Aguilar would be the guy. Now, we didn't think it'd be this way when it came to how the path to him starting got here, because again, Nico Iamaleava was the guy that we thought would be the starter, and then everything happened with him this spring. And you bring in Aguilar from App State, who did transfer to UCLA, 3,000 yards passing last year, 23 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, most experience of the guys in that room. But it's also Jake Merklinger, another guy that is a freshman that is competing in that role as well. Both those guys have gotten first-team reps for most of fall camp. But Pete did point out that it was George McIntyre who really did impress at last weekend's scrimmage for the Vols, but he did say that the odds of a guy like him as a true freshman starting are very low.
Well, there's two ways you can look at this. You can either look at it as, hey, wow, all these guys are just really good and we can't decide on who the guy's going to be, or all these guys are kind of just okay or not great, and we got to throw somebody out there. So, and look, the coaches are never going to tell you that, right? They're always going to gas it up as, hey, these guys looking great. They're making all the throws, good decisions, all those kind of things. We'll find out when the season actually gets here. And again, Syracuse is no slouch. That was a team that surprised a lot of people last year. And your number one under Fran Brown was their head coach that could really give you some problems in week number 1. And, the orange versus orange matchup there the day before, Carolina takes on VT up there in Atlanta. My concern level with Joey Aguilar, and this will happen for any Tennessee quarterback as long as Josh Heupel's there, that air raid type of offense, the run and shoot type of offense, not everybody fits in that, right? Not everybody is a fit for that type of offense. And Aguilar, I don't believe ran that when he was at App State. So how well does that transition over? I don't know. Again, from an experience standpoint, I get it. Maybe he's your best option, but I don't know if that's best option is not always the same thing as best quarterback, right?
And the other thing we have to think about here, Tyler, you bring that up, the transition from that App State offense to the SEC. The other thing we have to think about is he's coming from a group of 5 school where the competition is not consistently the same as what you're going to face in the SEC. Like now, last year, he did face Clemson early on in the season, 18 of 41 passing for 214 yards and a touchdown. But again, that's one game where the rest of the games are against group of 5 opponents. And so the schedule in the SEC is going to be a lot different now. He might have more playmakers at Tennessee this year, which could help, but also, and a pretty good defense, but also it's like, can he be, if he's that same quarterback he was last year at App State, if he put up these types of numbers where he's throwing for 3,000 yards, 20-something touchdowns, bring the interceptions down a little bit, I think that would be a good, 14 of them was not a little high last year. But I think if you see those types of numbers for him at Tennessee, I have a hard time believing Tennessee would have a bad year at that point. I think you see them with the pieces they have. they could probably surprise some people.
Well, that's the thing to me. His completion percentage, not great, just a tick over 50% last year. And then the interceptions as well, threw 14 of them to his 23 interceptions a season ago, including 4 in a game against Louisiana. Lafayette last year. So it's like, okay, this guy has trouble with completing the passes as well as hanging on to the ball and not putting it in harm's way. And again, we're going up against hard-nosed defenses in the SEC week in and week out. They will prey on that, and that could become a real problem for him if he's not cleaning those things up this offseason.
He's going to have to. I mean, again, SEC defenses are going to be so much better than what he faced at college in the group of 5 level. So we'll see what happens. Again, it's interesting how he got here to Tennessee and kind of how him and Nico have crossed paths without ever really probably even meeting each other. But it's cool from that aspect, but should be very interesting to see how he does as QB1.
They passed each other on the plane rides going from one place to the other.
Yeah. So it's very interesting, and I'm very curious. End of the year, I do want to have this discussion of how it all turned out for both quarterbacks.
Listen, we're going to be watching up close and personal and seeing how that goes. I'll do it for hour number 1. Coming up next in hour number 2, we'll get back into opponents and which non-quarterbacks threaten South Carolina the most this upcoming season. That's up next. Halftime show here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show brought to you by the Men's Clinic. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Cale Wilson along with you here on your Thursday on the game. I got ESPN on the TV now as Little League World Series gets rolling here. Again, Irmo playing coming up at 3 o'clock. Man, does anything look more fun than rolling down Little League Hill out there in Williamsport? They just showed a kid sliding down on a piece of cardboard. That looks like a fun time.
Oh, man, that's such a cool tradition from over the years out at Williamsport where the kids get the cardboard, they slide down the big hill in the outfield, and they go out there and do it. I mean, I've seen like adults do it too. So, I mean,
Sure.
It seems like something that everyone wants to do when you go to Williamsport. I feel like that's one of the things they're more well known for.
Yeah, so again, Irmo, I believe they're taking on Massachusetts today coming up at 3 o'clock. And again, you can hang out with Elijah Campbell out at Carolina Wings out in Irmo for that watch party coming up from 3 until about 5 o'clock today as we cheer on the Irmo Little Leaguers. But today's focus on this show is looking at non-quarterback threats for South Carolina this year. And again, this stems from Pete Nakos of On3 writing the article earlier on this week of the most valuable non-quarterbacks in college football, in which Dylan Stewart was on that list, second only to Jeremiah Smith and one above Caleb Downs. Again, both those guys playing for Ohio State. But again, I think for what he means to his team individually, Dylan Stewart is more important than all those guys, because you had guys on the list from Ohio State, Clemson, Texas, all places like that, which those teams are going to be really good regardless of if those guys are playing or not. Carolina, though, if you took Dylan Stewart off of it, that defense becomes an even bigger question mark than it already is.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, look, there's going to be so many questions about how these guys around Dylan Stewart, Lenore Sellers, how those guys kind of fit in and come together. Because, again, last year, I think we were probably asking ourselves the same questions, except probably even more so questions about, okay, what's Lenore Sellers going to be? What's this Dylan Stewart guy going to be? And then we have the same questions now in general about what are the pieces around those guys going to be like. So we have a little bit of the puzzle kind of figured out, but we're trying to see who's fitting in there, who's fitting in here. And if these guys can really mesh well together, we're talking about units that could be very dangerous this season.
So we're looking at the back half of the Power 4 slate for South Carolina now, and we'll get to Oklahoma coming in here on October the 18th. And again, this was a bad Sooners team a year ago on a lot of fronts, especially on offense. Who from this team concerns you the most for Carolina?
I think one guy that, and again, you could really go with this defense really anywhere, to be honest, because they were so good last season. I'm really interested in seeing what Jaden Ott, transfer from Cal. I really think if he can get the bulk of the carries with the Sooners. I mean, look, last year, 116 carries, 385 yards, 4 touchdowns, way down in production compared to his first 2 seasons with Cal. Now, how much of that had to do with being in a different conference, in a different league? I don't know. I would say probably going up against Pac-12 defenses 2 years ago was probably a little bit tougher, or maybe not, just based on the stats that he had. I mean, 2 years ago, 245 carries, over 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns. And even the year before that, as a freshman, 897 yards. So he has almost been a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher in his college career. I don't know if he will be able to get back to that type of number here now in the SEC at Oklahoma. But, it's going to be intriguing to watch just because he's proven that he can go out there and run the football efficiently. And Oklahoma's going to need him. Again, John Mateer is the quarterback of this offense, and maybe they'll be able to throw the ball a lot more since he's proved to do that pretty well at Wazoo. But you need to be able to run the football in this league, and Jaden Ott's going to be the guy they're counting on to do that.
Yeah, I had a couple of different options here, listed for Oklahoma. You can talk about R. Mason Thomas. Jaden Ott was on my list as well. I look at a guy like Deion Burks, though, and he's somebody that came in the transfer portal last year from Purdue and got hurt early in the season, as seemed like all their wide receivers got hurt. So we never saw him when the South Carolina came along. But when you go back and look at his stats in his last year at Purdue back in 2023, this guy was an explosive play machine. I mean, he was pulling out huge plays and scoring touchdowns left and right for what ended up being a pretty bad Purdue team, all things considered. But he obviously used his ability to leverage himself the opportunity to get to Oklahoma. We just didn't see it on display because he got hurt so early on in the season. He's short, he's quick, he's scrappy, somebody that can get yards after the catch. And if he's healthy when that game rolls around this year, I feel like he could be probably the favorite target of John Mateer as this season goes along.
No, most definitely. I mean, look, Mateer is going to need the weapons around him. I mean, that is pretty much evident. And look, if he could stay healthy this year, we're talking about an Oklahoma team that struggled so much offensively last year. Like when you think about that team last year, that defense was good enough to keep you in games. And the South Carolina game, I think, is kind of just an anomaly just because the offense made so many mistakes early in that game to where it's like, even if the defense had a great day, which I thought they were fine in that game, despite having 31 points on the board for South Carolina. But you look at the defense for Oklahoma, so good. But if the offense were just half as good last year, we're talking about maybe Oklahoma having a different season and the vibes being much different out there in Sooner country. But this year, the offense has got to be better, and the defense has got to continue what they did last year.
Move to Alabama now. That'll be the homecoming game on October the 25th. Of course, we're not talking about quarterbacks here. I'm not super afraid of Ty Simpson. I haven't had a chance to be yet. Maybe he'll prove me wrong as the season gets started here, but I feel like for just about every other position at Alabama, you can put all these guys on a dartboard, throw it, and whatever it lands on is probably a viable option to be afraid of if you're South Carolina.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, you could literally pick so many different guys here to where it's like, I mean, you can go offensive line. You could go Caden Proctor or Parker Brailsford. Those guys are the anchors of the offensive line. You could easily go running back. You could go wide receiver with Ryan Williams. I think for me, and I feel like maybe you would go this way too, Tyler, since we've talked about him before, I got to go with Deontay Lawson. I mean, look, he's someone that coming off a season-ending injury last year, he brings the experience, the toughness, and also the playmaking that Alabama needs defensively. Like, you think of Alabama defense and you think of like really talented players, and he reminds you, I think, of what they've had in the past defensively. And look, a lot of players are coming back for Alabama, and I think Deontay Lawson is the main one that we look at as like, hey, this guy's got a future in the NFL. So he's someone that I'm definitely high on going into this year.
Well, it feels like Alabama puts a first-round linebacker in the draft every single year. This past year it was Jahad Campbell, who is with the Eagles now, and as if their defense needed anything else to make it even more dangerous, you now have Jahad Campbell in the mix. So Deontay Lawson's kind of picking up the slack of what Jahad Campbell's leaving behind, and I expect him to have a monster season, and we'll see if he can pay Thomas Castellanos back in week number 1 for those comments that he had in the offseason. You know, of course, Lawson mentioned that at SEC Media Days a couple weeks ago. But, you know, Ryan Williams is obviously a viable option too, and we saw what he did over the course of last year. But as the season went on, and again, I get it, he was being doubled, like he became less of a threat as the year went on. So I have faith in South Carolina's secondary that they could probably do a good job of keeping him from destroying them in that game. But Caden Proctor is the guy for me. And you mentioned it a moment ago, obviously one of the best offensive linemen in all the country. Freshman year wasn't that way, but last year took a huge step forward. I don't know if you remember, he had the weird thing in the offseason where he went to Iowa and then came back to Alabama after like a week or something like that. But he's back in the fold, and he's going to be hard to deal with. And we talk so much about South Carolina's pass rush, right? Where Dylan Stewart is obviously going to command the most attention. If you can have another threat on the other side, then that'll allow Dylan Stewart hopefully some opportunities to be successful. If nothing else, Dylan Stewart can attract attention away from whoever that other guy is on the other side, like he did for Kennard, Kennard last year. And whoever's lining up against Caden Proctor is going to have their hands full in trying to get around him and get to a quarterback and get to the quarterback, being Ty Simpson as of right now at least. So that's a challenge for whether it is Stewart or whoever lining up against him. You're going to have perhaps the best left tackle in all of college football to try and get around to get to the quarterback.
And I would imagine it would probably be Dylan Stewart lining up against, like, if you're going best on best, you're definitely going Dylan Stewart. But if not, Dylan Stewart lined up a lot of the times from an offensive line vantage point on the right side of the offensive line going up against the right tackle. Like we were talking to Casey Henry yesterday or a few days ago, and he was talking about going up against Dylan Stewart and how he's easily one of the best pass rushers in America, which we all know to be true. But I do wonder because, Caden Proctor plays left tackle. Do you match him up against Proctor, or do you let one of these other guys go out there and prove it? I mean, look, it's going to be later in the year. I imagine you go best on best, but I'd be very interested to see what kind of performance a Brian Thomas Jr. or a Desmond Umazula or even like a JT Gear, one of those guys could have going up against a guy like that. Might be tough, but if they have a big game, it's like, hey, like they're really proving that they belong.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly have to see. And we in that stretch of the middle part of the season and that 4-game block with Ole Miss going on the road to Oxford. Again, this is a team that came in here and, quite frankly, embarrassed South Carolina a season ago, and you hope you can get your lick back on the road in the Grove this upcoming year. Again, this is another team that they're not as loaded as they were a year ago, but there is still a lot of talent on this team that you have to account for that could give South Carolina problems.
Absolutely. No, you're most definitely right on that.
Who's your pick for Ole Miss?
Pick for Ole Miss. I think it's probably easy to go with someone like, an Austin Simmons, but obviously for something like this, trying to think. Who do you go with on this?
So I went with a name that we actually became familiar with in the offseason, Trey Wallace. If you look up his stats, he's Harrison Wallace, formerly of Penn State. But remember, he was a guy that Carolina was really courting in the transfer portal back in December that obviously ended up deciding to go to Ole Miss. And again, Lane Kiffin got another little dig in at South Carolina with that in the process. But he's somebody that didn't get as many opportunities as he felt like he probably should have gotten. And that was due in part to the fact that you had a crazy good tight end in Tyler Warren in that offense a year ago. But, Penn State wasn't utilizing the wide receivers as much as they probably should have in his time there. And he's looking for a chance to break out. Now, he's working with a young quarterback in Austin Simmons. But this guy from, again, all we talked about back in December when he was looking at Carolina in the transfer portal, this guy is a definite number one type of guy that could replace that production that Trey Harris left behind a season ago.
Yeah, and I'll go on the defensive side of the ball here. I remember talking to this guy during SEC Media Days briefly, TJ Dottery, who actually started his career out at Clemson, and now he's at Ole Miss. He had his best game against South Carolina last year. He had a sack on Lenore Sellers, had a season-high 13 tackles in that game, 11 of which were solo, which I think is the most impressive part about it because he never eclipsed double digits before or after that. But he's someone that Ole Miss obviously views very highly as a linebacker, and given the fact that he got the experience playing very well against South Carolina, that game comes all the way in November. I mean, that's someone that really could make a big impact for the Rebels in that game.
So we've got 8 games that we've already talked about so far. 2 more left as far as South Carolina's Power 4 opponents go with Texas A&M and Clemson. And once again, a lot of hard choices on who's going to be the biggest concern for South Carolina. We'll hit that coming up on the other side as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Cale Wilson along with you on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Cale Wilson along with you on your Thursday here on the game. Again, we're going through South Carolina's Power 4 opponents and discussing which non-quarterback on each team gives us the most reason for concern that could potentially hurt South Carolina when that game does come here. And we'll get to our final two. Month of November, you've got Texas A&M, you've got Clemson. A&M is a team that, well, let's face it, if you get to the month of November, that's kind of when they start falling apart, as it did last year. And hopefully that's the case for Carolina this year, and that you can take advantage of them when they're not maybe playing their best football. But I look at somebody that we only briefly got to see in the game a year ago, and that's Le'Veon Moss, who was their feature running back that got hurt early in that game against Carolina, tackled on the far sideline. I don't remember if it was Dean Adderley or somebody that tackled him, but came up limping and didn't come in for the rest of the game and proceeded to have to sit out for the rest of the season. But he seems to be back in good shape now, and again, they expect him to have another strong year. And listen, if he would have been able to play the rest of last year, in that last month of the year, there's no doubt in my mind he would have gotten to 1,000 yards. Now, they do have another complimentary back in him with Amari Daniels, who did a fine job carrying the load after that. But Le'Veon Moss at full health, with what I believe is supposed to be one of the better offensive lines in college football this year with the guys they have returning, that's going to be a problem.
You never know what that can look like. But a guy like him, I mean, he had 10 touchdowns at that time last year before getting hurt, nearly 750 yards on the ground. There's no doubt he would have eclipsed 1,000 yards. And I think he probably could have hit maybe, with a few games left to go, that final month of the year, probably over 1,200. Like, I think that's very much a real possibility there. So we'll see what that looks like for him this year. That was probably going to be my pick as well, but I'll be different and look at someone else on offense. I'm very interested to see what Casey Concepcion looks like for the Aggies this year. And you're right, it is a good one because you look at him, and the name might sound familiar to South Carolina fans because that is someone that South Carolina was very much interested in bringing here out of the transfer portal, and obviously lost out to Texas A&M in that regard, as did a few other teams. But his production last year, I don't think was anything that catches your attention like, oh man, like this guy, like you're gonna have to really watch for him as the top target. No, I don't think that's necessarily the case if you go based on last year. 53 catches, 460 yards, 6 touchdowns. Got off to a really good start. Again, albeit against Western Carolina, first game of the year, 121 yards receiving with 3 touchdowns. That was his only 100-yard receiving game of the season. Everything else was about 50 or under. So he's been held in check, and I'm interested to see what this South Carolina defense with. You look at the defense this year and what they've lost, I'd argue that the secondary is the one spot where they really have not lost much. Now, if this is the guy that shows up from 2 years ago, well, then we got a different story on our hands because you look at him 2 years ago in 2023 at State, 71 catches, 839 yards, 10 touchdowns.
Well,
we're talking
go ahead.
We're talking about a complete 180 in terms of production. And if that's the guy that shows up for that game going into November, I mean, that's going to be a much bigger issue for South Carolina to try and contain him in that game.
Now, it's important to remember last year he did lose Grayson McCall, his quarterback, early in the season, if I remember correctly. So he did not have the primary pass thrower to work with for the majority of the season compared to the year prior. So that could have affected those numbers a little bit. But, yeah, he's somebody – I remember what his deal at A&M. Was it like $1.5, maybe $2 million for this year? I think
it was 2.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Maybe reported.
He was a hot commodity in the portal this offseason. And again, he's twitchy. He's that guy that can line up in the slot, yards after catch, all those kind of things that I'm assuming Jalen Kilgore is going to be tasked with having to cover in that game.
Yeah, totally. I mean, look, it's going to be a difficult challenge. If he can get back to that level of production he had, again, A&M paying him a lot of money to come to College Station. Like if they're banking on the fact of his production being so much better heading into this season, and if it is, that is going to be a real challenge for a guy like Jalen Kilgore or DQ Smith, one of those guys to have to stop.
So one more game in the regular season. Of course, it is with the rival in the upstate. And as I mentioned earlier, with Alabama, you could just throw a dart at the board on the entire roster. It probably hit somebody that's going to be a problem. For South Carolina, same thing here with Clemson. As we've talked about many times this offseason, they have the most experience coming back. They are the best overall roster they've had probably in 4 or 5 years. The one that looks capable of competing for a national championship. It's hard to pick who's your number one non-quarterback option here.
Man, you're right. You really could go 1,000 different directions here. Look at the offense. There's so much talent. I mean, the one area I feel like Clemson really doesn't have a true returner at is running back. And that's obviously losing Phil Maffa hurts. But you have a guy like maybe Gideon Davidson who could potentially come in and make a big impact right away as a freshman. That's one guy you could look at for sure. I'm going to go, honestly, I think I'm going to go Sammy Brown, linebacker, had a really standout freshman season last year. 80 tackles, 11 and a half TFLs, and 5 sacks. You want to look at I'm not comparing the two necessarily. Look at what Dylan Stewart did last year with 10 and a half TFLs, and I think it was 10 and a half TFLs and 6.5 sacks. Sammy Brown's not far behind in terms of, you talk about freshman stars from last year. We talk so much about Dylan Stewart. Sammy Brown doesn't get talked about much at all, I feel like. And he was a guy that was the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year last year in 2024 and was a freshman All-American. Big year for him, I think, coming up as a sophomore, someone that Clemson is obviously super, super high on. A lot of different guys you can look at on defense, but Sammy Brown, that's definitely a good name to look at there as a potential breakout candidate for the Tigers this year.
I'll stick on defense here, and again, no bad options here, really. Talk about comparisons to Dylan Stewart. TJ Parker coming off the edge is a man possessed at times. You look at some of his numbers last year with 11 sacks, somebody that could give South Carolina a lot of problems. And again, it goes back to what we said about the offensive line, where again, the tackle struggled throughout all of last year. Got better as the year went along, but still, you have what is quite literally a potential top 5, if not top 10, if not top 5 pick in the draft coming up next year in TJ Parker that, whether he's coming off the left side against Josiah Thompson or coming off the right side against Casey Henry, they're going to have their hands full for 4 quarters in that game.
Going to be hard to stop. I mean, that's another great pick right there. Another guy that very well could be an All-American at the end of the year. So many good players on this Clemson team, and people wonder, from South Carolina perspective, like, are they really going to be that good this year? I don't see any reason why they can't be. I mean, they play in the ACC, which helps a lot, but I'm telling you, man, if they come to life in week 1 and beat LSU, I think that really sets them up well to have the season that I think they very well could have, potentially going undefeated.
Well, look, they have a team that we know the most about, right? They had so little turnover. They brought so many guys back. They didn't really hit the transfer portal that hard. They brought in only a couple of guys. So we know this feels very old school, right? This feels like before the transfer portal and all that, where there was just mass movement of players left and right. You would know a lot about these other teams coming this year because okay, these 5-6 guys are back on defense. These 8-9 guys are back on offense. They've been in the system for a couple years. We know what they are, and that's kind of exactly what Clemson is, and that's exactly the way Dabo Swinney wanted it to be. He focuses so much on high school development as opposed to the portal, which, both are very, very important. But this is the kind of team that he's been dreaming of having these past couple of years that, again, is loaded with talent just about every single spot.
No, most definitely. I think this is the year where we see it really all come together for Clemson, where they've been good. They made the playoff last year, but again, they lost to South Carolina, had a lot of other losses on their schedule. This could be the year where they really all come together.
Well, a year from now, South Carolina could be looking at a new apparel provider as their deal with Under Armour comes to an end at the end of June 2026. We'll dive into what's happening in Tennessee and where they're headed as they ditch Nike next year, coming up next, and what that means for South Carolina as the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Cale Wilson rolls on here on your Thursday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri along with you, Kay Wilson, producing on the other side of the glass here on your Thursday on the game. We'll kind of comb back through our list of players that are non-quarterbacks that are going to become the biggest issues for South Carolina this year as far as their Power 4 opponents go. But venture off the path of what's being played on the field a little bit here. Yesterday, did you see the new deal that Tennessee has inked with Adidas for 2026?
I did. This is fascinating what's going on here. And you look at it, Adidas was the old sponsor of Tennessee back in the early 2010s, but this is an opportunity that I think Tennessee really couldn't have passed up. And you think about it, it's like, why would you leave Nike? Well, when you see how much money that Tennessee could potentially make here with Adidas, it's easy to see why.
Yeah, so it's a 10-year, $100 million deal, which of course equates out to $10 million a year for the school. There's an NIL component baked into this as well, which we'll get into here in a moment. But I was scrolling through Twitter yesterday as this news had come out, and I came across this clip from the Sports Animal, which is a sports radio station there in Knoxville. Jason Swain on one of their shows in the afternoon detailed how he felt Nike had been undervaluing Tennessee.
I need to drive the point home so you can understand. They don't value you enough as a university, as a program, to pay you what you're worth. How does that make you feel to know that you are not paid what you are worth? Your worth to them is not important as you think it is. How does that make you feel? That's how Tennessee feels. Tennessee is one of the hottest programs in the country, and Nike doesn't see it, and they don't value Tennessee. So what do you want Tennessee to do? Oh, that's okay. That's okay, Nike. You don't care about us. You don't respect us. You don't value us. We'll take you. We'll take your scraps. While you give all your money to Ohio State and Texas and Alabama and Florida, we'll be happy with your scraps. Just give us your scraps. We okay with that. No, we Tennessee, damn it. We Tennessee, man. You gonna treat us as such.
So I think it's an interesting way to look at this. And look, I've been around here covering this program for the past handful of years, and I feel like ever since I got here, I've heard nothing but about from this fan base how much they can't wait to move on from the deal with Under Armour and maybe go to a Nike. Because, again, Nike kind of has the market share when it comes to college sports programs. And when you look at just the Power 4 alone, which is roughly about 70 schools, depending on how you view Washington State and Oregon State, Nike has like 50 of them. When you count Nike as well as Jordan brand schools like Michigan, North Carolina, Florida, teams like that. So Nike obviously has the stranglehold on the market, but it's interesting they point that out because you can be a Nike school, but your deal can be way, way different than the top-end ones like Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, and all that kind of stuff. And it sounds like that was the deal with Tennessee, which created frustration that, hey, we think we're worth more than this. We're going to go find somebody that's going to pay us what we think we're worth.
No, totally. When you look at this, let's see if I have it right here, from 2014 to, again, the stats that I'm looking at don't have it fully updated to, only till the 2022-23 academic year. Total cash value during that almost 10-year span, $7.6 million. Now, what did you say the Adidas deal was?
It's
10 years, $100 million?
Yeah, so $10 million a year from Adidas.
Exactly. That is, and again, that's $7.6 million. If I'm reading that correctly, is over an 8-year period. So you're talking like $1 million or less a year. I mean, you want to talk about Tennessee being undervalued by Nike. The way I look at it with Nike is that if you go to Nike, you're just another footnote there, right? You're just another school to them. But at a market like Adidas, that doesn't have all the big players like the Ohio States and the other schools out there, the Alabamas in college football and college athletics in general, Tennessee could be the face of Adidas in a lot of respects.
Sure.
And so I think this makes sense from a financial standpoint, but also from the standpoint of why would Tennessee want to be, like an afterthought at Nike when they can be the main attraction, a company like Adidas?
And the thing that makes this deal even more interesting that I imagine is going to become a common thing with the future of these apparel deals going forward now is that there's a baked in NIL component to it. And this is per Ross Dellinger, who wrote the story yesterday for Yahoo Sports. He said players will get a piece of the $100 million plus pie in a significant way too, and for some of them immediately. Adidas is set to have unprecedented NIL opportunities for UT athletes across all 20 sports. So as a part of this agreement with Adidas, there's quite literally going to be a provision baked into every single year that they get money from them that goes directly to NIL. So deals done with athletes, all those kind of things that's guaranteed over the life of this contract. Now, this is different than revenue sharing because we talk about, you know, like the Blanchard deal at South Carolina announced earlier on this week. That's money that can go into your revenue sharing that you know is going to be guaranteed every single year in terms of paying your athletes directly from the school. This, what Adidas is doing with Tennessee, is something that would fall under traditional NIL, which does have to go through the NIL clearinghouse with Deloitte. But, I mean, I imagine this is going to be looked at as very legit deals where they can say, hey, just for example, Joey Aguilar is the quarterback at Tennessee now. We want to do $1 million deal with him or $500,000 or whatever, you know, this upcoming year as a part of our brand deal with him. They can do that. And that's something that they are determined to dedicate every single year to the athletes at Tennessee, not just in football, but across all their sports, which I can see why this deal seems so inviting for Tennessee to want to sign off on.
And again, this deal won't start until July 1st, 2026. Right.
But they did say they're going to look for individual deals before the Nike deal is up.
Which is true. But again, just to clarify there, again, July 1st, 2026, it'll run through 2036. And so this will be the last year with Nike. But again, this is a partnership with Adidas and Tennessee where the two sides were together from 95 to 2014. And, going back to Tennessee this next year here. Now, you look at the uniforms Tennessee has, and I think that's another big discussion point here. I believe they had the smoky grays. What do they call the gray uniforms they have? They had those in Adidas, right?
They did. Well, now Nike has actually unveiled a smoky gray for this upcoming year that I think looks really bad because they messed with the numbers. But the original smoky grays, which I believe debuted in 2013, are from Adidas. They had those special black Halloween uniforms that they played against Carolina in, I believe in 2009 when Lane Kiffin was there. Those were Adidas innovations. And look, everybody was hopping on the boat of trying to get to Nike a decade ago. But again, in today's world of college sports, you're going to look for a deal that's more advantageous for your university. And what Adidas was offering Tennessee, that was impossible to turn down.
Oh, totally. Again, in this market of, I know you said it doesn't directly correlate with revenue sharing, but in this market where every dollar counts, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you're in a day and age where you're a business now. You're no longer just a college that has athletics. Like, this is not the 1900s or even the 2000s anymore. Different times, and you take the best offer that you can, the best deal out there. And again, if you don't feel appreciated by one company, it's like any job out there. Why would you stick with them if they don't really value what you're worth? And Tennessee is going out there and getting what they think they deserve.
Yeah, so again, Carolina's deal with Under Armour comes up the end of the June of 2026. Now, much like Tennessee announcing it now, we should know probably relatively soon what the deal is, if they're re-signing with Under Armour, they're going with another partner, and what that deal is. But this is something that should come up in conversation like, hey, Tennessee got a pretty good deal as not like a A1 brand in college football right now compared to, or college sports right now, compared to an Ohio State or a Michigan or a Texas or Alabama or something like that. Can you, as South Carolina, get something similar is the big question.
No, most definitely. We are probably going to be talking about this, I would say this time next year. We'll hopefully have an idea of what the future does look like. Because, again, it's coming up soon.
Yep.
About a year and a half from now, we will know what the deal probably is with South Carolina.
Well, the deal ends in less than a year. So June of 26 is when it ends, when the contract ends. So, like I said, we'll probably know sometime, hopefully soon, which way they're going. Wes brought up something interesting to me earlier on today that I want to hit on the other side, and that's the Dawn Staley factor in all this, because not every school has a Don Staley card that they can play. Could that be an advantage for South Carolina? We'll discuss that coming up next as a wrap-up hour number 2. It is the Halftime Show. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Cale Wilson on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Halftime Show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler, Jack Veltri, and Cale Wilson along with you here on your Thursday on the Game. I'll remind you once again, the Game Summer Golf Classic coming up a week from tomorrow, sponsored by Krager Showrooms formerly known as the Nest, over in the Vista. Tee times at 9 a.m. We're going to be at Charwood Golf Club, by the way. Tee times at 9 a.m., 7:30 registration. Onion sausages for breakfast, mimosa bar from Saki's Wine and Spirits for lunch, and mimosa bar from Saki's Wine and Spirits and Firehouse Subs for lunch. Got to get that right. I'm going to have prizes to give away, and the golf gun makes its return. It's only $400 for a team. If you want to sign up, give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to sign up. Again, 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to be a part of the Game Summer Golf Classic, sponsored by Krager Showrooms. As I wrap up the hour here, again, talking about this apparel deal that Tennessee has with Adidas starting in 2026, it begs the question of, okay, which direction South Carolina going to go with this? Wes and I were talking about this earlier, and I think Carolina has an interesting card that they can play with Dawn Staley, right? There is, maybe UConn is the only exception, because I wouldn't even say Kim Mulkey's a bigger, rivals quite what LSU and, Brian Kelly have on the football side of things. But very few places besides UConn and South Carolina can say that their women's basketball program is known as far and wide, if not more, than their football program. And that's what you have here at Carolina with Dawn Staley, who, again, has a relationship with Under Armour, but doesn't really wear the products on the sidelines and those kind of things. Is a Nike conversation where, hey, maybe if we can get Dawn and some of our apparel on the side, on court side for every single game, how valuable could something like that be? And how does her reach and brand that she has going on these talk shows, going on podcasts, promoting her book, how does that leverage something into a deal like this that other schools don't have when it comes to their women's basketball program?
I think she would play a major role in whatever direction South Carolina goes in terms of whether it's sticking with Under Armour or moving to Nike, moving to Adidas. Heck, going to Jordan would be another option too. A lot of Reebok too. I mean, who knows? Maybe I doubt they'd ever go to Reebok. But
I don't think Reebok is in the apparel game anymore for entire teams.
No. I mean, you see shoe deals and stuff, but that's really, I think, the extent of it. But more realistically, let's say they go to Nike. I mean, I think Dawn plays a big part of that. And you mentioned the fact that she does not wear the team apparel on the bench. She wears Gucci. She wears her Eagles jersey, which of course has the Nike logo on it.
It does.
So
that's true.
I do wonder how that. I doubt anything comes of that, but my thought process is go ahead. Actually,
I was gonna say I don't know. I think her Randall Cunningham jersey might be an old school one. I don't know if that did have the Nike logo on it or not. I'd have to go back and look at a photo because I think it may have just been old school and not Nike.
Yeah. So I think what we're getting at here is that she has a lot of power in South Carolina and college athletics. I mean, she's one of the more recognizable faces, especially from a women's sports and women's basketball standpoint. So to get her to potentially, I don't know if she ever would, but if Nike make a deal with her too to have her wear their apparel, the Nike apparel, the Nike shoes, makes a big difference because she has such a big cult type of following. I mean, South Carolina women's basketball, you can argue, is just as big, or honestly in kind of a league of their own when you look at how many people are glued to that program. Winning helps a lot, and women's basketball at South Carolina is definitely something really big to look at when it comes to this whole situation.
So I'm looking at her Randall Cunningham jersey as well as her Reggie White jersey, and they don't have Nike logos on them. And I'm looking at her in a picture of the Jalen Hurts jersey, and she's got a jacket over it, which I imagine is for the purposes of covering up the Nike logo. So she was smart. She was smart with that, and I imagine Under Armour probably said, hey, because, again, Under Armour doesn't have the outfitting rights to the NFL. Hey, we get it, you're an Eagles fan. Just please cover up the swoosh if you can.
I'm sure she's low-key probably rooting for Nike to become the sponsor for the uniforms and everything for South Carolina. I think a lot of people are. I think that's really what they want to see. And you talked about it earlier. I think a lot of people are ready for them to move on from Under Armour. I don't think Under Armour is bad by any means, but you look at what Nike's done. You look at even Adidas, I think, would be another good option for them.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. Yeah, I don't see her rocking any kind of swooshes here, but we'll see if that plays a part in the negotiations here, because again, she has reach far beyond the game, right? She is a name that's known outside the sports world, that, you know, when she talks or makes an appearance, it has a lot of pull, and that could be very valuable for a brand like Nike or Under Armour or Adidas or whoever when it comes to these new contract negotiations. But again, we should hopefully find out soon which way South Carolina is going. And I know a lot of fans want Nike. They've been talking about it for years, but it might end up being more financially beneficial to go somewhere else. So we'll see what Donati and the crew up there in the front office decide to do.
Real quick, make a prediction. Where do you think South Carolina? This would be for what? The end of 2026 when the football season starts?
No, it would start in next football season. So
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So
it would start next year.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like probably jumping into the pack with Nike. Hopefully you just get a good enough deal that, you know, can maybe rival what Tennessee's got with Adidas. I don't know. But again, when you look at the numbers across college sports, Nike has a choke on the market because they have 50 some odd teams in just Power 4 alone. That I guess if you're not going to re-sign with Under Armour, that would probably make the most sense.
No, it totally would. I think that's the direction this thing will ultimately go. But look, I wouldn't mind seeing them go like to Adidas or something. But Nike is the premier athletic brand when you talk about, you know, jersey dealers and stuff. Nike's usually the way to go.
We'll see what happens. And again, hopefully that news comes out here in the relative near future. I'll do it for 2 hours of the halftime show. One more hour to go. We'll kind of dive back into some of the names that we're looking out for as far as non-quarterbacks go that South Carolina is going to have to face this year. Up next here on the halftime show on the game. Tyra Ed here telling you once again about our friends over at Pro Swing Columbia. And I got to remind you once again, coming up this weekend is the start of the Swing for a Cause Course and Sim Challenge, which is a 2-day charity golf event supporting Prisma Health Children's Hospital here in Columbia. It's open to all skill levels, and this unique event features the indoor simulation course at Pro Swing August 16th and 17th. That's coming up this weekend, followed by a traditional 18-hole two-person Captain's Choice tournament at Cobblestone Golf Club on August the 21st. So again, it doesn't matter what your skill level is, whether you're a pro or somebody that's just starting out, you can take part in this. It supports a great cause in Prisma Health Children's Hospital, and it's going to be a lot of fun as well. If you want more information or to book online, go to proswingcolumbia.com or give them a call at 803-592-3916. Pro Swing Columbia. Welcome back in hour number 3. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Cale Wilson along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Only 17 days away from kickoff for the Gamecocks to take on Virginia Tech in week number 1. As we phrased it earlier, Xavier Legette days away from kickoff for South Carolina. We touched on this earlier, but if you haven't checked it out yet, and it's a really long, about 4-ish minute clip, so not the most radio friendly thing in terms of the way we do our sound here, but I would seek out Dow Loggins' interview on the Josh Graham show from yesterday, from I think it's WSJS in North Carolina, where obviously they were talking about and previewing Appalachian State football for this upcoming year, but Dow Loggins told a really great story about Xavier Legette and the relationship they had that led to him getting the first touchdown football of Legette's NFL career that is now in Dow Loggins' office with his jersey and all those kind of things. Because to kind of sum it up, Dow Loggins was the guy that believed in him, right? Well, we've talked about this before. Legette, in his first 4 years at Carolina, didn't do a whole lot. He had, the touchdown return against A&M, had done or had the crazy catch in the bowl game against Notre Dame, but really left a lot to be desired in those first couple of years, and then exploded on the scene in his final year en route to being a number 1 overall pick. And a lot of that had to do with Dow Loggins' belief in him and trying to get him more incorporated in the offense. And that was essentially Legette's way of thanking Dow Loggins for, hey, thanks for believing in me. I wouldn't be here without you.
Totally. And a quick little Cliff Notes version of the 4-minute video, since we really can't play it on here, since it is really it's a very good story, but it is far too long for radio purposes. But essentially, he was thinking about transferring after the 2022 season when Marcus Satterfield was the OC and stuff. And I think if Marcus Satterfield had been the OC going into 2023, I think we see Xavier transfer.
Yeah.
Not because I don't know if their relationship or whatever, but from the standpoint of he wanted the ball and he wasn't getting the ball, I think he was ready to move on. Again, he had the COVID redshirt year, which if he didn't have the COVID year, I mean, think about it. Is he in the NFL right now? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, he have theoretically gotten into somebody's camp as an undrafted free agent, maybe, and maybe he would have impressed people there. But yeah, he would have not have definitely gotten drafted if his career ended after 2022.
The road to the NFL, to where he is now as a first-round pick and playing for the Panthers, would have been so much more difficult, to where he's probably a UDFA. He's got to make a team. I mean, he was not – he didn't what was the stat you said earlier? He had 42 catches through his first 4 years at South Carolina.
Yep. So his final year, he had 71 catches, obviously over 1,000 yards. But in his first 4 years, he had exactly 42 catches to account for. And again, when you look at him physically, and that's what Dow Loggins noted, and I've heard that story before, be told that, when he got on campus, he's like, hey, who's that guy? And look, if you've been around Xavier Legette, he's every bit of the 6'3", however many 200 pounds he is now, and he just looks like a physical specimen that I can imagine probably caught Dow Loggins' eyes. And Dow's like, oh, everybody's telling me, hey, it's this Juice Wells guy, and he's like, okay, but let me take a look at Legette here. And Legette basically entrusted him, saying, hey, man, I feel like I need to go somewhere else if this isn't going to change. And Dow Loggins made some changes in the offense, got him involved, and the rest is history. But and he did also know, hey, Xavier lost his parents when he was in high school, and that's where it kind of really pulls at your heartstrings when he says the thing about, I didn't really have anybody else to give the ball to, so he trusted that to Dow Loggins, which is now in his office there at Boone for Appalachian State.
Yeah, I mean, it's super cool how it worked out. And again, when Xavier was like, yeah, I'm thinking about leaving and whatnot, D'Lo was able to convince him, hey, just give me till, I think he said, just give me till May.
Yep.
To fit you into this offense. And if you don't like it, if you don't like the way it's looking, then I'll help you. The cool part about it is that he said, I'll help you transfer.
Yeah.
I will personally help you out with getting where you want to go. So again, that relationship really is special. And again, COVID was a time for sure.
Sure.
But it definitely makes you think, when you look back at it, it definitely did wonders to help out Xavier Legette's career, because again, he really had not scratched the surface of what he could do at all. He had the kick return. He had the big game in the Gator Bowl. But if that's your sample size of what his college career really amounted to, I don't think he would. I don't think he would have the same career he's had right now.
Well, let's think about this. Let's say, the Dow Loggins conversation never happens, or let's say Marcus Satterfield stays for the 2023 season and Leggett does decide to transfer in December or January of 2022 or 2023. I think we would have looked at that as one of those like, oh, well, we thought this guy was going to be something. It just never happened. Good luck to you. Nobody would be hitting the panic button like, oh, my God, I can't believe we lost Xavier Leggett, because you just hadn't seen it up to that point. You would say, well, he's the guy that just didn't measure up when it came to college football, but Dow Loggins helped find that hidden gem on your own roster that exploded into a superstar. Now, yes, we also have to say, if Juice Wells doesn't get hurt, Xavier Leggett does not have as great of a season as senior year, because Wells would account for some of those catches as well. But I very much think they would have been a 1A, 1B type of situation that, again, Loggins did see in Leggett to allow him to be that kind of guy. And once Wells went down, again, the rest is history. But it is crazy to think that, like, he could have been a transfer out with very little fanfare that people would have said, oh, okay, yeah, good luck to you, but you're just not a fit here at Carolina.
Can you imagine him? Two things here. Can you imagine? Can you imagine him having gone to like a smaller school and just imagining how, like, does he have the same type of success that he did in Carolina? I don't think so. Like, he could have been the guy, but again, I think Dowell really catered that offense to him, and it helped that Juice was hurt, and it makes you think. You bring up the 1A, 1B thing. South Carolina 2023 did not have a good season. 5-7, a lot of injuries, really awful October. And Juice was only he didn't even play much at all. He got hurt in that Georgia game where he caught the touchdown. That was it for him at Carolina. But if he's healthy the entire year, what kind of season do you think Carolina has?
Man.
Like those two together with Rattler.
Sure. I mean, I think you could easily say, maybe you win the Florida game or something along those lines. One of those games that was really tight. Maybe you have a better opportunity to beat Clemson. I do think having two viable threats at wide receiver on either side of the field is maybe worth at least one more win, which, again, at least gets you back to a bowl game. I don't think it suddenly turns them into, hey, a 9-10 win team or something like that. But, they did the best with what they had. And I think a lot of what helped out Xavier Leggett was having an experienced quarterback in Spencer Rattler as well. And I pulled my trivia question to Wes and Chris today was about his 76-yard touchdown against Mississippi State that year, where, I mean, you watch that play because Trey Knox picks the DB. Leggett runs the crosser, about 5-6 yards downfield, and Rattler places it perfectly right out in front of him to where he doesn't have to slow down, doesn't have to reach out, boom, right in the breadbasket, and then he just shows his speed as he runs away from all the Mississippi State DBs. So, when you ask the question of, okay, if Leggett went somewhere else, how successful could it be? I still think he could have had a good season, but I think the caliber of quarterback would have been significantly less if, let's say, he went to a MAC school or a Sun Belt school. That could have affected how successful he could have been.
I'm rewatching the play on my computer here. I mean, just a simple little crossing route, a little slant, honestly.
That's like my favorite play on NCAA or College Football 25, by the way.
Oh, so it's not the four verticals where you just throw the ball up to Nick Carver on the left side?
I keep it short and I get yaks, man.
Man, I look at that play and it's like, what was his speed clocked at?
I don't know, but I think
they talked about it, like in the 20s, I think maybe
something like that. Because again, when he gets to about the 50-yard line, he just starts pulling away. Nobody was going to catch him.
No, like he blew past 2 or 3 Mississippi State defenders, and just a crazy play. That was probably one of the better plays you'll see from a wide receiver. I mean, it's a simple route, but the speed at which he took it at, and he goes 76 yards to the house. I mean, it's crazy to think about.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And again, it was fun to get to cover him here at Carolina, and hopefully his second year in the NFL nets out to be a good one as he works with Bryce Young for another year. But 17 days till kickoff there. So Xavier Leggett days until South Carolina squares off against Virginia Tech. Our theme of the show today has been talking about non-quarterbacks and other teams that pose the biggest threat to South Carolina. And again, we ran through each and every team so far earlier on in the show, but if you had to pick like one guy out of all the ones that we named earlier that you think could give Carolina the most problems of the Power Four opponents they will face? Who sticks out to you the most?
For me, I think just in general, like, is it like in general in the SEC?
I mean, you can throw in Clemson and VT as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough way to look at it. You know, honestly, I think for me, I will go back to the Clemson route. There's so many talented players. You could go Bryant Wesco. You could go, TJ Parker. I said his name earlier. Sammy Brown's definitely someone that I think is super interesting. Linebacker from Clemson, was the ACC Defensive Freshman Player of the Year last year, or Newcomer of the Year, sorry, a freshman All-American. And the numbers are just crazy because he has 11 and a half TFLs. He's got 5 sacks, very comparable numbers to someone like Dylan Stewart. And we know we talked about TJ Parker with similar accolades to Dylan Stewart in a lot of ways and what he can do off the edge. But Sammy Brown being out linebacker, putting up those numbers, very good year for him last year. And he's someone that I think on that Clemson defense, a lot of ways you can go, someone that really sticks out.
I look at Caden Proctor again as perhaps one of the, if not the best offensive linemen in all of college football that has a very good shot at being a first-round pick this upcoming year. And look, we have a lot of confidence in Dylan Stewart and his ability, right? But it's that other question on the other side of, okay, who's going to be the complementary piece if Dylan Stewart's not lining up against Caden Proctor? If he's coming off that other side where they're going to be doubling him or trying to triple him with somebody, tight ends, running backs, that kind of stuff to prevent his path from the quarterback to being easy. And then if you have a Des Yu or a Brian Thomas Jr. in a one-on-one with Caden Proctor, can they be successful against Alabama? Because, again, I expect that to be a tight competitive game like it was a year ago. And if you can get pass rush coming from both sides like you had a year ago, you're going to be in good shape.
Seriously, I mean, you're totally right. And maybe it is a combination of Dylan Stewart and then the other side, it's BT, Des Yu, JT, whoever it might be. You might need to rotate some guys in there at first to really see what you have. But someone from that group, I think, is going to emerge at some point, and you're going to have a real threat off the edge. Don't forget, Brian Thomas Jr. lost in the shuffle last year, and honestly, over the last few years, had 4.5 sacks last year. Mm-hmm. So not far behind a guy like Dylan Stewart, who had 6.5.
He should be that guy. Like, he should be the one that plays opposite. Yeah, we think he should be. Now, again, got to stay healthy, obviously. And how's he going to handle an increased load? We'll have to see. But if he can give you, I don't know, a little bit more than what he gave you last year, that should be fine. And hopefully allow Dylan Stewart to be successful on the other side. Because, again, that pass rush is going to be so critical. Because we talked about last year, when you have a good pass rush that's not allowing quarterbacks to sit back there and let the plays go for, 10, 12 seconds, then the rest of your defense falls in line too.
You're talking about a guy like Brian Thomas. If he can get that sack number up to about 6, that's where Dylan Stewart was last year.
Yep.
You get Dylan Stewart up to about 10, where Kyle Kennard was, you're really not missing much in terms of what you lost with Kyle Kennard. You're essentially replacing that production.
Absolutely. Earlier on today on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, we had Josh McCuston of Soonerscoop.com to join us and to talk a little bit about the Sooners ahead of the October 18th matchup here in Columbia. We'll replay that conversation for you coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Cale Wilson on your Thursday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you here on your Thursday. We're efforting Josh McCuston of Soonerscoop.com. We'll patiently wait and see if we can get in touch with him. We're having some trouble with our phones as of right now. But I'll remind you once again, by the way, today, Irma's Little League team taking part in the World Series out in Williamsport. And you can go hang out with Elijah Campbell at the watch party at Carolina Wings at 1000 Marina Road in Irmo from 3 until 5 today. Again, for their first game as they get rolling out there in Williamsport. And Chris, as we talked about last week, a team that we can hopefully watch for about the next week and a half to kind of bridge that final gap before we get into football season.
Are there other games going on today, too?
It should be starting like at 1. They usually have them all day because they had international games yesterday. So should have kind of the same deal today, 1, 3, I guess 5, and 7.
Go Irma.
Yeah.
They put up, there was something earlier that they put up about I don't know if it's maybe what do you call it, fan sentiment or something like that for the buzz rankings. So, yeah, I guess it's fan sentiment. But the Little League World Series buzz rankings as far as, the views and likes that these teams, some individual teams have generated, Irmo, South Carolina, blowing everybody away. And 543,000 views and 6,000 likes. Lamar, Texas is up next, and they're half or a third of all that. So,
well, when you have a walk-off to send yourself to the, I was about to say College World Series, the Little League World Series, that's
America's team.
Yep.
There you go.
They're coming up today at 3 o'clock. We finally got our guy, Josh McCuston of Soonerscoop.com on the line. Josh, first of all, appreciate you taking your time, and we'll be quick with you here. Only got a few minutes, but busy week, obviously, from Oklahoma from the standpoint of not only being 18th in the preseason poll, but all this chaos going on with John Mateer and people digging into his Venmo of the past. How are things out in Norman this week?
Yeah, when you look at it, and you guys know how this goes, I didn't wake up Monday morning and think, we're going to talk about John Mateer's Venmo for a good portion of this week. So, that caught me a little off guard, but it has been. It's been, what I will say for Oklahoma fans, I think they'll take this fall camp over last year's, where basically every time we wrote a story, it was new player injured, new players lost for the season. It was just catastrophic last year. And they're okay, we can deal with John Mateer's Venmo. So I think it's a trade OU fans are living with right now.
Yeah, and so let's go on the field a little bit. This is Wes. Appreciate you joining us, man. What are you guys hearing out of camp? Just, you can take that any direction you want. Has there been a storyline or two just in terms of either Mateer's progression or the team in general that has maybe stolen the headlines there locally?
I think really what everybody is watching, and I think everybody that watched Oklahoma knows, watched them last year, it's the offensive line. What's going to happen there? Because if John Mateer is what you think he can be, and Jaden Ott can go and be the guy that he was a couple of years ago at Cal, where, he was a legit NFL draft prospect coming into last season, I think we know this defense is going to be pretty good. I think everybody kind of accepts that. So if this offensive line, it doesn't have to be top 5 in the SEC. It just has to hold water. It has to be okay and not something. You guys saw it in Norman last year. So, OU had no answers for South Carolina. So I think if they can be okay, and it sounds like they like their depth, I'm waiting to hear that story of, okay, the 5 are starting to come together. We're starting to figure out who it's going to be. And I think they're locked in probably at center and at one of the guards, but there's still some question marks there. The difference from last year is I think the talent's there. I think they've got to figure out who the 5 are, and to me that is that's going to dictate where this season goes, where if OU has another year like last year where they're trying to make a bowl late in the year, or if maybe they're kind of one of these dark horse playoff teams.
Josh, it's Chris. Thanks for your time, man. So looking at Brent Venables', tenure there, 3 years at Oklahoma, 2 6-7 seasons with the 10-win season sandwiched in between. And it really struck me visiting Norman for the first time last year. You go around, you got kind of the Heisman Trophy plaza, so to speak. You got all the banners up, all the signage, just how tradition-rich this program is. And I remember you telling us last year the expectations going into the year, and they were pretty high. Obviously, the team didn't meet them. So Am I correct in thinking this is kind of a make or break year maybe for Brent Venables out there?
I don't think there's any question. To me, the question I get most frequently from Oklahoma fans is, what's the breaking point? What is the amount of wins where he's safe? And I think the bare minimum is 8, which at a place like Oklahoma, that's an insane thing. I mean, like, fans are like, I can't believe I'm saying this. But yeah, like we take 8. But when you look at this schedule, all the game, there's just a lot of hills to climb. I think in the initial, coaches poll, I think there were 9 SEC teams ranked. Oklahoma plays 6 of them. It's kind of wild. And so I think there is no question this is a season that will. I don't think it's just about this year. I think this could have a large role in what OU does for the next 4 or 5 years, because if it goes badly, they're starting over, and they do that while this recruiting class is not where you want it to be. Obviously, you're going to lose some of the big pieces of that if there's a staff change. Next year in Oklahoma is one of the best years I've ever seen in the state of Oklahoma. There are something like 7, 8 top 300 guys in the country, which is it's unusual in the state of Oklahoma. So they need to hit that and build for the future. So there's a lot riding on this season going well. And if it does, 2026 could be a really good year, because this team should return a lot, if they can keep the wheels on in 2025.
Again, talking to Josh McCuston of Soonerscoop.com. Got about 3 more minutes here before you hit the break. One of the guys in that depleted wide receiver room last year was Deion Burks. We didn't get to see him because he was already injured by the time the Carolina game rolled around, but he was an absolute weapon for explosive plays at Purdue. Now that he's finally seemingly back to full health, what is he capable of in this offense this year for Oklahoma?
They need him to be the number one guy, because I like the receiver room. I think there's some good pieces there, but I don't think it doesn't have the blend of experience and talent they had last year. Losing Jalil Farouk to Maryland, losing Nick Anderson, who's tremendously gifted, to LSU. Those are tough losses to replace. And so I think Deion is going to have to step in a role. Now, he's still, almost since he's been in Norman, injuries have been a problem. He's been nicked up a little bit this fall. Now he's back out there now. Obviously Oklahoma's hoping everything is going to be fine. I think they're trying to kind of treat him with kids' gloves. They like you said, they know what they have. It's just about getting him to the season, letting him be healthy. But again, they have guys who can be number 2 options, can be number 3 options. If it's not him, someone's going to have to emerge that maybe is going to have to be a year ahead of schedule, or is a guy that maybe is better than we think he is. They need something to happen if Deion Burks isn't going to be that number 1 guy.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to seeing Oklahoma coming in here, coming up in October. Should be a fun matchup, and hopefully both these teams are still ranked at that point in time. We'll get a good game in Willie B.
Yeah, I honestly can't wait to see that game. South Carolina has always been a place I've wanted to see one.
Josh, we appreciate your time, and thanks for dealing with our technical problems. We appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, guys. Enjoyed it.
This is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Hour rolls on. Coming up next on your Thursday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Feltry, Cale Wilson, along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Again, that was our conversation from earlier on today with Josh McCuston of Soonerscoop.com. And that's obviously going to be a challenging matchup for the Gamecocks coming up in mid-October. But one thing that I think is going to play to South Carolina's advantage is, of course, the atmosphere in Williams-Brice Stadium. One of the best things about the atmosphere in Williams-Brice Stadium is, of course, when they crank up Sandstorm, you get the towels going, the USC chants, all those kind of things. But there's some people out there, Jack, that are not a fan of the Sandstorm tradition at Williams-Brice Stadium. And our guy, Josh Pate, now of On3, by the way, was on Outkick's college football show recently. And the host on there were not being too kind about Sandstorm, and old Josh came to the Gamecock Nation's defense.
Sandstorm. When you tell me that one of your best and biggest rituals as a college football program is a Dutch techno song that came out in 2000 that became popular for you in 2009, I'm thinking to myself, you need better traditions if that's the case. It looks cool, Josh. It sounds great. You know, it gets the fans on their feet. It gets them going. I can't buy into that. That is the thing that bothers me. Much like Kroger Field to Kentucky, Sandstorm to South Carolina encapsulates that program.
Darude. Let me gather myself. We're live. I don't want to say anything that I'll regret, or we'll get it thrown off the air. Listen, I don't care how it started. I don't care where it started. South Carolina owns that song now. So wherever it came from, whatever the country of origin is, Sandstorm is rooted now in Columbia, South Carolina at Williams-Brice Stadium. And here's what I appreciate about them. I'm going to speak for Gamecock Nation now. I'm going to hop on the cockaboose. It's not even Cocktober. And I want to tell you, we don't care what you think about our pregame rituals. We don't care what you think about our songs. We don't care what you think about our in-stadium environment. I guarantee you can't hear in here on third down, though. I guarantee you that. Even if they put us at noon, I guarantee you can't hear in here. South Carolina is the most underrated home field environment in all of college football, and there is nothing that the young men on either side of me in this three-box setup on my Zoom screen could tell me to convince me otherwise.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Jack.
No, he's not wrong about it at all. I mean, you look at most underrated atmospheres in college football. I feel like South Carolina does typically get the short end of the stick when you talk about Penn State and the whiteout, and you talk about all these different atmospheres at LSU at night. Even Clemson, I feel like, gets a better rap than South Carolina in terms of their atmosphere at Willie B. Like, over the last few years, especially as Carolina has gotten better at football and back to being a little bit more relevant in the sport, like, Willie B is right up there with any of these atmospheres out there. I'll take Willie B for my money any day of the week.
It still blows my mind how, you know, when you're sitting there in these environments watching Sandstorm and all these other traditions go on, if you're a player on the field, how do you, A, communicate with your teammates, and 2, think hard enough to be able to concentrate on the next play when there's 80, 90,000 people losing their minds all around you?
Oh, it's hard. Like, how can you honestly do it? That's the real question. And I remember asking, I think it was actually TJ Daugherty at SEC Media Days about this, and he was just talking about how those fans are just like, it's insane there. It's wild. And ask any opposing player that's played at Willie B before. It's a crazy environment. And I think it's probably a top 10 college football stadium in terms of loudness and just everything in between. And Sandstorm's a huge part of that for sure.
Sure. And I feel like it's one of those things, and I don't know who these guys were on Outkick that were hosting this show, but I feel like it's one of those things that you can't hate on if you've seen it in person for yourself, right? Again, I had admired it from a distance before I ever came here and started doing this job. Seeing it in person, I'm like, dang, this really is cool. And I was not that I was ever hating on it or anything like that, but I didn't have a full appreciation for it until I truly saw it in person. So for those guys, for anybody out there that's skeptical of how cool Sandstorm is at Williams-Brice Stadium, go experience it. You'll feel a difference.
You got to go there and see it if you haven't. Like, at night, for sure. But I'll also say, during a day, like Josh is right, about during a day game, even at noon, I think the loudest Willie B got, all right, Missouri, the little earthquake with that a touchdown by Rocket Sanders, it does not get louder than that. I will say though, being at the LSU game, which was a noon kickoff,
Yep.
that stadium was, I think that was the biggest crowd of the year. I know they sold out every game, but
Sure.
that crowd was wild, and it was as loud as you could hear it during Sandstorm.
And I would attest to that. And yeah, despite being a noon game, when you had college game day and all that kind of stuff leading up to it, it created quite an environment that unfortunately didn't go Carolina's way when it was all said and done. We obviously know the story of that game really, really well. Wes has challenged me because I've only watched it from the press box. And look, even in the press box, you still get a sense of it being crazy, right? He's challenged me for at least one game this year to spend a significant period of time amongst the crowd to get even a better sense of it. So I'm trying to decide maybe the Alabama game to just kind of maybe hang out in one of the tunnels or something like that and just kind of really take in the full stadium atmosphere.
You have to. And specifically at the beginning of the game, I think, is where it just like, it's wild, man. Like, I think the last time I sat at a game, not as a reporter, was probably Tennessee in 22, and that was like one of my last, I think it was my last time I was a student at USC, and it was again, there really is nothing like it. I mean,
Sure.
You sit any part of the stadium, upper deck, lower deck, wherever, freaking the rotunda tunnel area, like you could literally get, you'll take it all in and be like, this is like, it's comparable to Georgia, I think, in a lot of ways too, with how loud it gets there, and the lights definitely help with all that. So
I'll admit, maybe Rotunda, maybe that's a good idea because then you can kind of see a little bit of everything.
Full perspective.
Yeah, so I'll have to figure out because with a media pass, we can walk around, right? We can go to different parts of the stadium. So I just haven't taken the opportunity to do that, but I'll definitely do that at some point this year to get an even greater perspective on what that environment is truly like.
I'll tell you, Wes is definitely right about that. Definitely, it could literally be for the first quarter. Like, it's different. It's definitely different than they say the press box does sway, which I think we can both confirm. Like, it definitely does.
Yeah.
When it gets pretty loud, but I mean, an Alabama game, I think is a good one to pick out for sure.
What if Joe Morrison say if they ain't swaying, we ain't playing?
Yeah. So I think it typically happens. I don't think it happens every single time we're up there for a game, but at least once or twice, or maybe even 2 or 3 times a year, when Sandstorm's going, especially the remix. The remix is the nice little addition they've had over the last few years, and putting that in, it definitely gets the crowd fired up.
And the cool thing about Sandstorm is it's not something that the school created, right? They didn't say, hey, guys, by the way, this is the new thing we're going to do. It happened organically. It goes back to that Ole Miss game in 2009 on a Thursday night where they beat, I think at the time, number 4 Ole Miss, and Sandstorm was played a couple times on that critical drive late in the game where they got the stop they needed to win, and then it just kind of became a thing. And then it incorporated the towels, and it incorporated the chant, and it just naturally over time became one of the coolest things in college football, which makes it more special because the crowd created it. Gamecock Nation created. This wasn't a memo sent out of, hey, we're now doing this thing. Y'all better learn how to do it. Like, it happened organically, which I love.
That's the best way to do it, I think, honestly. Like, it would not be the same way it is now or viewed the way it is now in terms of like Darude literally coming here for a game in 2023. Like, that would not be happening, I don't think, had it not happened the way it did, where it's like it just randomly happened. And that's probably the best way you look at it from that standpoint of, I mean, imagine it was something that USC sent out like, hey, everyone, we're going to do this. Like, doesn't come off the same way.
Doesn't catch on the same way, certainly. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the third hour of the halftime show. A infamous high school football coach has found yet another job. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri, Cale Wilson on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Kale Wilson wrap things up here on your Thursday afternoon before turning things over to Jay and Terry for today's post-game show. Jack, I do have to ask, are you familiar with the name Rush Probst?
Not particularly. I heard about what we'll get into yesterday, but I didn't know too much about him before the news came out.
Being from the state of Georgia, this guy is a headline machine, and it's a story that I've been following for years. There's a really good article that ESPN did years ago about the intimate details of his coaching career up to that point, which I think was around 2019 or 2020, but a lot's transpired since then. So for those that don't know, and you would have been too young for this, there used to be a show on MTV called Two-A-Days, which focused on Hoover High School in Hoover, Alabama, which was a powerhouse football program. Rush Probst was the head coach, and it was a reality show basically about the football team. And Rush Probst was this, hard-nosed, cheer-your-butt-out type of coach that won a lot, right? Very successful in the state of Alabama. Well, in the years since the show came out, he's gotten into a lot of trouble. While at Hoover High School, it was discovered that he had a second family where he had been having an affair, and his mistress gave birth to a child. He would then leave his first family for the mistress and that second family, which caused all kinds of a firestorm. He had to leave the state of Alabama, went to go coaching in South Georgia at Colquitt County, where he got into controversy there and got into trouble. Then went to Valdosta, where he got into more trouble. And for the past couple of years, he's been laying a little bit low. But here's the thing. For somebody that's as successful as he's been, and he's won, 7 state championships between Alabama and Georgia, and 1 national championship back in 2015. This past, 2 seasons ago, he was a associate coach at Coosa Christian School in Alabama, and was a head coach last year at Pell City. Well, Coosa Christian's head coach has gotten suspended for the upcoming season. So who did they call? They called Rush Probst to come in and take over as the interim coach for the upcoming year. A guy that at every stop that he has either gets himself in trouble to where he has to resign, gets the school in trouble with some kind of sanctions or something to that degree. I can't wait to see what transpires at Coosa Christian this upcoming year.
But he's won.
He wins, and that's the thing. He wins.
He wins. So winning, again, it's not good what happens off the field and all that, or even on the field, I guess, in some ways, with the controversy he's undergone. But, the guy wins. Head coaching record of 296 and 117. Again, the national championship, 7 state championships. He hasn't won a state championship since 2015.
Yeah, he was with Colquitt County, and they were in the state championship game every single year.
Yeah, and he was there from 2008 to 2018. Now, after 18, he was at UAB. Again, he was at Valdosta for a year. He was actually at Coosa Christian in 2023.
Yep.
It says here as an associate. So he was there before, which I can also imagine probably played into the fact of him coming back with their coach currently also getting suspended, which is kind of ironic in how that worked out. And then he was at Pell City in 2023.
But it's so funny because, again, I've been following this for a long time because it's an intriguing story to me. But you don't hear from him for a couple years, then he pops up and he's got a new head coaching gig somewhere. And every single time, the AD or whoever hires him, the principal of the school says, we're aware of his past, but we think he's changed. We think he's reformed, and he's going to come in here and be a great coach and an upstanding citizen. And then he gets whatever school that is into more trouble, and he has to go pack his bags and go somewhere else. We talk about U-Haul All-Americans being guys that transfer a lot. What would be the equivalent for a coach that just bounces from place to place to place?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. What would this be for him? Like in the last, let's see. So since 2020, this would be his 3rd school, but technically, it would be his 4th stop. So I don't even know. He's he would abuse the transfer portal if he were a player, I think.
Oh yeah, probably so. No doubt about it. But I don't know. It's just a fascinating story to me, and I will keep tabs on Coosa Christian this upcoming year to see what kind of trouble he can ultimately get them into. But again, winning is what's most important at the end of the day, and we've seen that across college and pro sports. Look, I'm not shy in saying that I think Urban Meyer is a really bad person. But he is, or not a evil person, but just not a good dude, right? But he's an amazing head coach. And if he wanted to come back to head coaching in college football, somebody would hire him tomorrow, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, again, if you win, you can go get a job pretty much anywhere. That is the ultimate cure to all the bad things, all the sins that you've committed. You can go out there and get a job if you win. That's
think about Bobby Petrino. He embarrassed Arkansas, where they had to fire him a decade ago for that thing with the volleyball player, and he's right back on their staff again now.
Exactly. We see this all the time. But when you look at it, and here's the interesting thing. With a guy like Probst, 71.7% winning percentage throughout his career. Again, 4 wins away from 300. But his most recent year of coaching at Pell City 2 years ago, they went 1-9 and missed the playoffs. So is he what happens hypothetically if he has a great year? You know, does he stick around as a head coach moving forward? Is this in the interim tag?
Well,
I mean, what are we thinking?
If he can't come back to Coosa Christian for a second year, if the other coach comes back, somebody else is going to hire him. Like, hey, look, he can still win. And, you know, insert whatever program is struggling, they'll take him.
Oh, totally. And, I mean, like, the guy is got to be infamous in Alabama. I mean,
he's infamous throughout the Southeast at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you know far more about him than I do just from following his career longer. But, I mean, it's crazy.
In the month of December, Google his name and see what's happened over the past couple months. I guarantee you there'll be a story there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a story that we're gonna recount here in a few months, and it won't be a shock to you. I know that.
Yeah,
so.
we'll certainly keep tabs on that. Jack, as always, I appreciate you filling in. We'll do this again tomorrow.
Yep, one more time tomorrow, man. Looking forward. So I'll see you then.
Yep, we'll see him tomorrow morning for the Extra Point and then for the halftime show as well. That'll do it for today's edition of the halftime show. Coming up next, it is the postgame show with Jay and Terry as your Thursday rolls along, getting you that much closer to the start of the college football season. Only 17 days away from South Carolina and Virginia Tech squaring off in Atlanta here on The Game.